Hello everybody, this is Lara at Pure Elliott Wave with a Bitcoin technical analysis update for you. I cannot give you my Elliott Wave count. I updated that yesterday for my membership at Pure Elliott Wave, so if it's Elliott Wave analysis you want a Bitcoin, click on the links in the description box below and you can go and get it at my website. I'm going to do this video in two parts. The first part I'm going to address some multiple comments made on my last XRP video, pointing out that there's some bearish divergence. Yes, there is, but I'm going to show you why I'm not necessarily giving it too much weight at this time. And then the second part of the video, I'll do my usual rundown of technicals for Bitcoin at the daily time frame. Let's look at some divergence. Now, this person hasn't said divergence with what, so I'm going to assume they're talking about divergence between price and RSI. I don't like making assumptions, so if you want to make a comment with your own technical analysis, please be specific so I know exactly what you're talking about. They also haven't given any dates. They've just said divergence at higher time frames, which really isn't particularly helpful. So let's assume we're going to look at the weekly time frame, and let's assume it's with RSI. Again, I do not like making assumptions. Yes, there is bearish divergence between Bitcoin and RSI here, and this is the kind of divergence I will pay attention to because the pivots are really close by. Here we've got bearish divergence between the week beginning 3rd of March and the week beginning 17th of March. Price closes higher and RSI is noticeably making a lower pivot. And it does lead into some bearish movement that lasted a couple of months or so. So that was a pretty good indicator of what was going to happen next. We've got bearish divergence here between the week beginning March 24th and here week beginning December 8th, 2024. This bearish divergence yielded a small pullback, and then we developed double bearish divergence here with the week beginning January 19th, 2025, and that yielded a short-term bear market of over a month or so, over a couple of months. So that was pretty useful. Now we've got bearish divergence up to here. It's continuing. Now this is what I mean about, got to be a little bit careful about it. This is the week beginning May 11th, 2025, and there's bearish divergence between here and both of these two pivots previously, but now the pivots are a little bit further apart, so they're less reliable when your pivots are further apart. It didn't yield a big bear market, it yielded just a few weeks of relatively shallow bearish movement, and then prices turn around and gone on to make new all-time highs. Now there is this strong bearish divergence between these pivots that are quite a distance away at the weekly time frame. I think those are best looked at the monthly time frame. Let's go back up to the bullish run up to 2017, and I'm going to show you why you've got to be a little bit careful with divergence between price and RSI on Bitcoin. We're looking still at a weekly time frame, and this is the really important high in December 2017 from this low down here in February 2014. Not all data sources have this spike, but all data sources do have the slow basing action, acceleration through the middle and explosion at the end as price moved from below 200 up to just under 20,000, an absolutely huge bullish run in Bitcoin's price history. If you had noted this divergence back here between November 2013 and June 2014 and said that it must lead to a bear market, you would have been very wrong. Price closed here just under 3,000 and you would have missed out this huge bullish run when price closed to just under 20,000. So you've got to be careful if your pivots are too far apart. At this time frame, it would be better to look at the monthly time frame. So let's look at some divergence in this bullish run that would be more applicable toward in the early stages of this bullish run. The close for price here is 761, week beginning June 12th. And the close for price here is 963, week beginning December 25th, 2016. There's some bearish divergence here, but it was only followed by essentially 2 weeks of a really shallow pullback. And then there's a clearer, shorter term bearish divergence. This is the kind of bearish divergence I would note between the week beginning December 15th, 2016 and the week beginning February 26th, 2017. Some pretty obvious bearish divergence with pivots fairly close together and good pivots on price and good pivots on RSI, but it didn't lead to much. It led to basically a relatively shallow pullback, and then price just continued on higher and RSI continued higher. So here's an example of divergence not working, and if you had expected, because you now have divergence here to here to here to here, and between these last two pivots it's really clear and strong, if you had expected, well, that has to lead to a really big bear market, you would have been wrong, and price just continued on higher. Now here's another example. Week beginning June 4th 2017, the close for price 2973. Week beginning August 27 2017, the close for price 4612. Price is very obviously closed higher. RSI is very obviously lower. There are good strong pivots on both price and RSI, and yet price continued on higher. So from the close here at 4,612, if you'd said that that divergence, and you could have extended it back to here, has to lead to a bear market, you would have been wrong, and you would have missed out this huge exponential growth to the eventual close 19,345, week beginning December 10th 2017. So this is a warning that you have to be a little bit careful with bearish divergence between price and RSI on Bitcoin. So that's the weekly time frame. Let's look at monthly. Week beginning December, or month beginning December 2017, and the month of February 2021, some really strong bearish divergence, and then you've got another little bit here between March 2021 and October 2021. You've got some pretty good bearish divergence here. These pivots are relatively close together, not so far apart like these, so this should be a little bit more reliable, and it was followed by a bear market that lasted about a year, so that was correctly predictive of what was going to happen next. But these two pivots, if you'd taken it from here to here, you would have missed out on this final piece back here. What about divergence between March 2021 and March 2024? I think these pivots are too far apart to be really a good predictor of what's going to happen next. It was followed by a reasonable bearish movement. It didn't last that long, and it wasn't as deep as previous bearish movements, and then prices just continued on higher. So the close for price in March 2024 was 71,312. If you expected that to yield a huge bear market lasting a year or 2 years or more, then you would have been sadly disappointed. Prices just continued on higher. At the monthly time frame, it's too soon to note any divergence because there is no pivot yet developed on price, and there's no pivot developed on RSI either. So to note this divergence between these two pivots, I think that would be premature and would probably lead you astray. My first rule for divergence, which I've developed over the years, is wait for really clear, obvious pivots to develop before you identify the divergence. And don't have your pivots too far apart. If your pivots are too far apart, it doesn't tend to be as predictive as when your pivots are closer together like they were for this small piece here, which did follow or did yield a bear market that lasted over a year. Let's move into some basic technical analysis just on the daily. I'll run through this quickly with you. The first thing to note on this chart is it looks like Bitcoin's forming a flag pattern, and at the low here we have a bullish engulfing candlestick pattern for August 3rd 2025. It doesn't have push from volume, but for Bitcoin it can often be weak up off its lows, so a bullish reversal pattern that doesn't have support from volume in a normal market would be a concern. For this market, I've learned to not be as concerned. If you go back and look at Bitcoin's really important historic lows following bearish movements, you will note it often doesn't have any bullish reversal patterns, and when it does, they may not have support from volume, and yet those lows have been sustained to this date. So a good strong bullish engulfing candlestick pattern does suggest that this low is fairly likely to remain intact, especially as it found support about the lower edge of this little parallel channel that contains this flag pattern. The best performing flags and pennants complete within 15 sessions. This one's now lasted 21, so the probability of a successful outcome, which would be an upward breakout closing above the upper edge of the flag pattern, on an upward session which must have support from volume for confidence, and then a run up to the target of about 136,000, the probability of that is now reducing. It's still somewhat reasonable, and we still should look at this flag pattern, and this is how we use it. Wait for price to close above this trend line on an upward session which must have support from volume compared to the session immediately prior, and preferably 2 or 3 sessions immediately prior. If you see that, then use the short-term target for the next short-term upward run to about 136,000. I'm being really conservative with this. I'm taking the flagpole from this high to this low, not this one and not this one here, because this is the straightest piece of the flagpole. I'm adding that distance to around about where the breakout point is. So now you know how to calculate the target. When you see where the breakout point is, you can more accurately calculate your target. It may be a little bit different from mine. Support about 112,000 is holding, and I would expect that's really likely to hold because this was previously really strong resistance developed here in May 2025 when price was at a high just under 112,000, and this led to a reasonable bearish movement down to the low of June 22, 2025. And now we've got this upward movement with a shooting star candlestick pattern, which has yielded some bearish movement. Now we've got a bullish engulfing pattern here and a hammer for an interim low down here. I expect support about 112,000 has now been tested by a pullback and is likely to hold. I expect now to see price move up and away as most likely. Overall, as price falls, volume is pushing price lower, but overall volume is now declining on these bearish sessions. For the very short term, we've got a little bit of a support from upward movement in the last bullish session, but it's still a lot weaker than recent bearish sessions. So the volume profile for Bitcoin is more bearish than bullish at this time, but it can be weak off its lows, which does make Bitcoin's lows really difficult to identify. That's something I keep repeating on this channel because unfortunately it's true. I wish it weren't so. No new signal from on balance volume. ADX is declining, telling us this market doesn't have a clear trend at this time. RSI is neutral after reaching overbought and exhibiting very clear single bearish divergence as price closed higher. On July 22nd, the close is 120.023.50. Compare that to the close of July 14th, which was 119.86901. So price closed slightly higher and RSI was noticeably lower, and they both formed pivots. That's been followed by some downward movement. RSI is now below 50, so at this time frame, Bitcoin would be ready to move to new all-time highs because that divergence has now been resolved. It's been followed by downward movement. It's been followed by RSI moving well into neutral and below 50. So that's set up for the next bullish run. There was the same bearish divergence between price and money flow. Money flow is well below 50 now, getting closer to oversold, but not there. There is room for this bearish movement to continue. If RSI and money flow, if price does continue lower and RSI and money flow get into oversold, and then we see another bullish reversal pattern, then I would have even stronger expectations that that would be the low in place. But because that support area of 112,000 is so strong, because it was previously really strong resistance, I expect that's most likely to hold. I think we have found the low for Bitcoin for the short term. ATR starting to show just a little bit of an increase as price moves higher in the last couple of sessions, so that's good to see a tiny bit of volatility just start to return to the market. This could be an early indication of, yes, the start of the next bullish run. That's it from me today with a quick update for you for Bitcoin. Thank you.